artery and the vein. And secondary debulking is mandatory for invariably for all kind of rectus abdominis flap. So these are the 3 flaps for reconstruction used for soft tissue. And the hard tissue, we prefer to do a fibula and your iliac crest. These are 5 flaps that has to be concentrated by this maxillofacial fraternity.
Okay, coming to the next question. They've asked, how do you select your patients? Another the other point they've asked is, how do you time? What is the timing of selection of the reconstruction? That is the immediate or delayed reconstruction. And how do you assess the recipient area once the tumor has been resected? What are the criteria for assessment? And any comorbidities will be looking for the patient before reconstructions. I think I've asked too many questions. First one is about how do you?
Yeah, I can. That's not a problem.
Okay. Yeah.
For benign lesions, as I said, most of the time we have only that hard tissue defect, especially this odontogenic keratosis or the amyloblastoma or any other tumors which need only. You need to think about in terms of osseous reconstruction alone. You have to bury the flap most of the time. Most of the time, we don't require soft tissue at all. The mucosa itself can be used as a primary closure. And the flap is buried within the soft tissue, especially the oral mucosa. And small nick will be there in the outside of the skin. Whereas in that case, you can take the options. For trauma and benign lesions, you can take 2 options. One is primary or secondary. But advising for secondary reconstruction is you can wait for a disease-free period, whether the amyloblastoma is recurring or not, or odontogenic cyst is recurring or not, or any other lesions. For trauma, you have to wait how much is the outcome after the very high velocity trauma. In that case, you have to wait how the deformity is going to be resulted. Then based on that, we choose between the primary and secondary for benign lesions. The advantage of primary reconstruction is it's a fresh tissue. All the vessels will be intact, pliable, and you can use it for comfortable anastomosis or advance the flap. But then the secondary reconstruction, what I would advise is for mandible, you can put a reconstruction plate. If you don't do a primary reconstruction, you put a reconstruction plate at the time of resection itself. Leave it for 6 months or 1 year. Then you take it for that time. You will have the plane of tissue. You can get the cleavage so that in that place you can accommodate your flap. If you leave it like this without doing any reconstruction, just with your IMF is also one of the good options. But if you keep it like this, all the tissues adherence will take place. The plane of dissection will be very difficult, which enhance which jeopardize your outcome at the end of the procedure, even if you do a secondary reconstruction. So for primary, for benign lesions alone is suggested, and secondary reconstruction suggested if you anticipate any multiple recurrence period or latency is remission period is expected. Whereas in the case of malignant lesion, the only option is you have to give a closure. Either it could be in the form of microvascular flap or with your pedicle flaps or locoregional flaps. Because once the patient comes out, the basic function has to be done by the patient. In that case, you cannot leave the patient without doing any reconstruction. So malignant lesions will not have any option other than the primary reconstruction. Moreover, and you have to send the patient for radiation after a period of time, maybe 6 weeks or 4 weeks. In that case, if you leave it like this, again, the bed will get compromised blood supply. Coming to the selection of patients, none of the cancer patient is going to be healthy as far as our population that we have observed. It's my humble revelation that we have seen some 15 centers keep on operating we have the multi-center experience in that. So what we observed is none of the patient will be disease-free, comorbidity-free. Either it could be diabetic, hypertensive, or under long-term anticoagulant therapy. So in that case, you cannot expect the patient to be absolutely disease-free like how we get in the conventional maxillofacial procedures. So based on that, we have to design the treatment plan, and over which we go ahead with the reconstructive options.
Sir, in that case, what is the waiting period between a primary and secondary, sir? How do you plan your secondary? To wait for the disease to completely subside? What is the plan of duration, I'm asking you, between the primary and secondary reconstruction?
That's what ideal would be
I'm
a
clear?
primary reconstruction.
No,
Yeah, I'm
no
clear.
stipulated month or time is not there. It is there.
No, primary is the best for any kind of reconstruction, no doubt about it. But some of the
Okay.
patients, say for
Okay,
example, if odontogenic keratosis is suppose the Garland-Gall syndrome, the patients keep on developing the recurrence on and off, and we have to wait for some time. We cannot completely leave it like this. So if you do a we have few cases
Okay.
of recurrence of ameloblastoma in the fibula which has been used for reconstruction. We have seen a couple of cases. So
Okay.
so the first that is the design of the treatment plan. That is what where we need to explore much. If multilocular lesion reaching the soft tissue, never compromise with your primary section. That's what we have seen. If you do enucleation again, maybe for 3 months, 6 months, the patient will be fine. Again, the patient will come with a recurrence after 6 months. Again, it has got a once it has invaded the soft tissue, go for aggressive resection. That is with the continuity defect, you have to sacrifice the mandible or maxilla. And in that time, the first surgery is very important. If multilocular, remember, if multilocular lesion reaching the soft tissue, extensively invading, don't try with it. That's what Stolling also says for OPs. According to Stollinga, what he says is conservative management. Yeah, conservative management is just not enucleation and putting the carnoids alone.
Carnoid solution.
He says that enucleation, peripheral ostectomy, and excise the overlying mucosa. It's very important for OKC. See, when you excise the overlying mucosa, the amount of soft tissue defect which is going to result from that conservative approach will definitely need some kind of tissue approximation. So, to optimize the result, we have to think about that. You cannot go a tension. See, the second challenge in the oral cavity is non-keratinized mucosa will spontaneously shrink, unlike keratinized mucosa. Once keratinized mucosa is lost, cannot be restored. Non-keratinized mucosa will be supple and easy to close at the time of surgery. Once it comes out, definitely it will get open. So in that case, the conservative management, we need to think about some of the cases, at least some local regional flaps we have to put, irrespective of any kind of situation, just to give a basic seal, floor of the mouth or vital structures to connecting to the neck, infratemporal fossa should not go up. I mean, the communication should not go up after doing the management. So that principle plays a major role. Without any doubt, for malignant lesions, you have to go for a flaps. It could be a local regional or preferably a free flap. Few reasons that we are going to discuss in few minutes.
Coming to the next question, based on your experience, how do you plan your neck dissections?
My level of neck dissection is very limited, as my mentor of belonging to that malignancy is not there. MR&D I have done, and I'm doing supraomoid neck dissection, not more than that. And T1 lesion, T2 lesions. None of the patients are stage 2 and 1 and 2 are treatable. So second is again the post-op radiation we follow for the 4th week onwards. From the 4th week, send the patient for this IMRT. And we have seen we have on my own hand, I have got some 7 to 10 years of follow-up in my disease-free period for buccal mucosa and the tongue lesions. So 5 years for the tongue and the 10 years for the buccal mucosa. Patient is comfortable now. It doesn't have any issues. That is, the patient has to go for a neck dissection, MR&D, or supraomoid dissection followed by 4th week of radiation for 6 to 8 weeks. So those patients are comfortably doing well.
Sir, I do follow the same protocol, but I could see the radiation on the surgical oncologist, whichever kind of oral cancer, they prefer only radical. Very rarely they do MR&D also, but we only think about SOHND. Sometimes very rarely we contemplate MR&D, but they always go only for radical neck. Any protocol they are following, or ours is different, sir? Your opinion about that?
That's all, sir. My limited experience, exposure to cancer is very less. I have completely gone into the other part of the cancer surgeries. My limited
reconstructive part. Okay, I could understand.
Yeah, what I feel is like few things I want to give my inputs based on this experiences. What I have learned from the people is They follow the ST and
Okay.
NPV classification for staging of the tumor. Situation decides
Mhm.
tumor, nodal metastasis, and pathological grading, and depth of invasion. The depth of invasion
Okay.
plays a major role in that. Less than 1
Okay.
millimeter, the chance for
Okay.
recurrence is very less. Whereas in the case of involving more than that, going deeper, then the extension goes for extension for prevents the basic principle of any kind of cancer surgery. So
Okay.
cross section reveals what kind of neck dissection should be done. That's what the protocol changes. What
Very
they
good.
say is they start
Yes.
with
Yes.
neck dissection first, later they go for a primary section. Now they are saying they do the primary, then you come for the this thing. Or at the time of biopsy,
Neck.
so
Neck.
you take
Neck
from the
dissection.
the biopsy has to be taken. The idea of taking biopsy from the normal and the junction of the normal and the pathological tumors, one is to check the transitional state of the lesion. The center, we need to know the
Okay.
depth of invasion,
Okay.
especially when you take a tongue. The superficial must have got
Hmm.
necrosis, whereas the deeper portion will give how much of metastasis, how much of spread has taken place in the center of the lesion. That's why the two suggested parts for taking the biopsy for this CA lesions. So in that way, what I feel is
Okay.
extension for prevention is applicable even for neck dissections also. Instead of going for a conservative way, the idea is how the patient is going to live, spend the rest of the life after going for a cancer, rather than how the patient is going to be. So the conventional mindset is I keep on giving a footnote on that. The footnote of the presentation is conventional mindset should not be there for treating a cancer patient or reconstructive patients. It is not going to happen the similar way what we both are non-identical way of principles.
Okay, sir. Coming to the next question, it is about the flap failures. What are the intraoperative reasons for flap failure, and what are the signs and symptoms of ongoing flap failures? And what are the post-operative complications you faced after free and pedicled flap? Your experience. I'll come one by one.
Yeah, one by one I'll answer.
Yeah, first question.
The first is like flap failure. As I said, it is I'm telling that 15 centers we are having the observation for the over a period of time. In this flap failure, intraoperative flap failure is multifactorial. It's not a single factor which is playing a major role. First is the temperature that we noticed in this. It should be less than, it should be more than 24 degrees centigrade of the room temperature. And it should not be close proximity. Whatever warmer you place under the patient and you do a anastomosis, the chances of taking up the flap is they will get frozen actually. And some of the studies say you can store the flap in the fridge and do it for after it's being warmed and being anastomosed. But what we observed is like the temperature is sustained, air condition is blowing on the flap. Definitely that induces the spontaneous vasospasm. Second is tissue bed. Cancer is as bad as the uncontrolled diabetic. Patient will have a local defense completely compromised. Completely compromised. That's why the failed cancerization keeps on insisting about healing also. The healing of the normal oral mucosal wound differs from the cancerous wound or cancerous affected site or the flap which is placed over that.
Okay.
Third is the blood supply. What is the blood supply? The dysplastic cells will have abundant blood supply. Capillary blood supplies are more. As to feed the tumor more and more, it will have a lot of blood supply. But the dysplastic cells will never allow the monocytes to get aggregated, which is, and you can see lot of patients with chronic kidney disease with this CA patient, which has got some correlation with the monocytes and the Kupfner cells of the kidney. It's nothing, Kupfner cells nothing but modified this one, like glial cells in the brain, all these things all have. This will never reform. So dysplastic cells will have a bad healing. That's what the vascularity is given a prime importance, and the healthy tissues are selected for doing the reconstruction. Third is the irradiated tissues. Secondary reconstruction, as is that I think this can also cover your the previous question. Irradiated tissue, we take it for surgery. Suppose the patient has gone for a neck dissection, primary reconstruction, patient has come with recurrence. Again, you send the patient for surgery. Then you remove the old flap and go for resection and reconstruct the new tissue and send it for your radiation again sometimes. So in that case, already multiple surgeries have been attempted and radiated already. So basic tissue health is completely lost. So in that way, there will be a compromised this thing. blood supply was telling the time of anastomosis is very tricky situation where we face.
Okay.
All the patients will have a neck dissection, CA patient,
Hmm.
as we all know.
Yes.
See,
Yes.
all will get exposed to exposure of your
Hmm.
carotid sheath. Number one.
Yes.
This
Yes.
technical point I want to tell on this. See,
Hmm.
all these patients will have exposed to carotid sheath
Okay.
and radiate tissue. There will
Hmm.
be absence of patency of the vessel which is going to be anastomosis. You plan for superior thyroid or facial artery
Hmm.
must have
Hmm.
got tethered.
Okay.
So got fibrosed. So you'll not be happily do anastomosis with that compromised vessel. So you need to think about your external carotid
Hmm.
artery and your internal jugular vein, side to end
Hmm.
anastomosis. That is the
Hmm.
biggest challenge. And
Okay.
when you plan for this, you have to take a huge span of large span of flap to cover the
Hmm.
neck as well as the primary tumor. Say, for example, complete hand to be taken for your
Okay.
reconstruction of the oral defect. Why you want to take
Hmm.
long span? The long span will cover the carotid sheath and your
Hmm.
primary tumor as well. You have to sometimes divide this. If you take a ALT, you divide
Hmm.
into the primary flap, which is having a
Hmm.
dual
Hmm.
blood supply. One will cover the primary and the other will cover the neck. That
Okay.
neck in the sense under the skin which is going to be placed over that.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that is the second one.
Hmm.
And time of anastomosis, if time exceeds 111 minutes is the classical maintenance of ischemia. Within
Hmm.
2.5 hours, you have to finish anastomosis, not more than that. When that
Okay.
is compromised, then that
Hmm.
reflects in your outcome.
Sir, I have a question from my side.
Hmm.
What is the role of Doppler in case clinically we are not very sure about the viability of the flap? Do you have any experience of using Doppler to assess the viability of the flap, sir?
Doppler is the easiest way of assessing the flap vitality.
Okay.
Definitely, it
Uh,
shows the soft. It's meant for soft tissue most of the time, and perforators are well
okay.
detected by your Doppler. Nowadays, the
Okay.
you can incorporate the Doppler. We are doing a study on this. Infrared Doppler has come. You play infrared Doppler, which has got a
Okay.
high intensity pickup of the signals, ultrasound. You
Okay.
can incorporate with your mobile with the software which is given by them.
Okay.
So wherever you can pick up the signal immediately, so that you can
Hmm.
readdress the flap any complication occurs at the time of the post-operative period of time. So Doppler is one of the best way of doing pre-operative as well as for the post-operative. But
Post-operative.
long, yeah, but
Hmm.
long. So what we have to do is we have to keep on the flap, not on the site of anastomosis. You'll get a false
Okay.
positive result at the time of. If you keep it in the neck,
Okay.
you'll see the
Okay.
feeder vessel will give you a positive result, which is not going to reflect on the flap.
Okay. Okay. Coming to the next question, sir, about the post-operative morbidities. As you have done a lot of free fibula flap, the question is about the function of the leg morbidity and function after the free fibula is harvested. What problems you have encountered, particularly in the leg? That is the next question.
Let me take a few minutes to explain this part. The
Hmm.
functional morbidity is the challenging part of any maxillofacial surgeon, which is who is new to this field, going away from this own designed anatomical knowledge. When you come to the leg and the hand, both commonly will have a compartment syndrome, which we have seen only in one patient. What is this compartment syndrome? The leg has got three compartments: anterior, lateral, and posterior compartment. Once you excise the fibula from that, you create a dead space in that. We intensely do layer by layer closure in that. So all the inflammatory X-ray, which excreted from on the third day or fourth day, it is as bad as, it's very viscous actually. It is as bad as your oil. So what happened that all this collection will take place within the compartment, especially in the lateral compartment, and we invade the posterior compartment also to see the perforators in the posterior compartment, which is exiting through the soleus muscle. So what happens? We just do a layer closure. We involve all the layers, especially the fascia, lateral crural septum, and the posterior crural septum. We keep on suturing it. So all the collection will take place in that, which gives a compression over the a nerve with common peroneal nerve and the posterior tibial nerve in the
Okay.
compartment, which
Hmm.
exerts a severe pain, which is
Hmm.
characterized by blisters. The first thing, blisters.
Hmm.
Patient will have excruciating pain. Patient will not be able to tolerate at all. And the prone
Hmm.
individuals are females and obese patients are prone, followed by diabetic.
Okay.
So diabetic patient will always have a compromised vascularity in the leg, and again this precipitates your issue. So patient will have that. So how to identify this? First is the pain, fever, and the blisters will form. The challenge with finding out the blisters, like how to challenge, we put a posterior slab, we give a huge dressing to give a compression over the soleus muscle. So complete dressing will be hiding the whole this thing. What is happening inside will not be knowing that. So we have to identify with the clinical signs and symptoms.
Okay.
Subtracting the blisters, you can think about fever and the unbearable pain reported by the patient. Immediately open it and see. That is the best way of doing this. And how to overcome this? Avoid layer closure, loose closure. That is flexor hallucis longus. Flexor hallucis longus, and your flexor hallucis longus to be sutured with your interosseous septum, the septum which is connecting the fibula and your tibial bone. You have to suture it. After that, you go for a lateral crural septum directly over the peroneus longus muscle. Don't try to suture all the 3-4 layers inside. Then go for a subcuticular and then give a interrupted sutures. That's fine. Second is you keep a drain. Try to keep 2 drains actually. One is deeper layer, another is in the septal layer. The lateral crural septum, you have to keep it. And exit the drain away from the dressing. That's the more important thing, because unlike we do a removal of the drain the 48 hours, 72 hours, which is not going to happen with your microvascular, any of the microvascular or cancer surgeries. We sometimes have to retain the drain for more than 1 week, 15 days, sometimes 1 month also. So, and 15th day, we only 15 days, at the end of the 15th day, only will remove the dressing. We change the dressing, which is not going to happen with your drain. If you keep the drain inside, you have to open the dressing and do it. Instead, you keep the exit point at the away from the dressing, and you can give a closure to that. So the third is the swelling. Swelling can occur as a result of compartment syndrome or your lymphedema. Lymphedema of the leg usually happens when you take the posterior tibial vein. Sometimes posterior tibial vein itself acts as your peroneal artery. In that case, you cannot leave it like this. You have to take that vein. So once you take that vein, the venous drainage is, the overload on the venous drainage is more on the lymphatic, which eventually results in your edema. Foot edema will be huge. Blisters with foot edema is a classical sign of compartment syndrome. Excruciating pain, fever, another salient features of compartment syndrome. How to treat this? Remove this, completely do a fasciotomy. Just remove all the sutures. Decompress, how we do it for other wounds. Just decompress it and leave it for a secondary intention of healing. Once that is encountered, that is the biggest challenge for any of them to till the wound is completely get closed.
Okay, the next 2 questions I am skipping, as you have answered in the beginning of the session itself about the bone grafts. So coming to the next question about the microvascular anastomosis. What is your principle of anastomosing? Is it, how do you prefer? Is it end to end or side to side? What material you prefer for anastomosis? And is it artery vein or vein to vein? You need to answer all those questions, sir.
Anastomosis, the first is like healthy vessel to be connected to the recipient, the flap vessel. That is the first thing. Vessel mismatch should not be there, but none of the time you will have a apt match of vessel sizes, caliber sizes. Varies from the neck to your leg or the other flap, whatever flap you take. So that is the one. Second is, for when you do a venous anastomosis, you go for the high caliber vessel like IJV or common facial, not even EJV. EJV is not allowed. IJV ends to say or common facial vein.
Okay.
Common facial vein formed by the posterior branch of posterior division of the retromandle, which is forming the bone, so forming the drainage. That is the high. They have given a lot of values for size of the vessel. See what the drawback with the preoperative assessment is. Let me share few of things with this. We have to do a preoperative assessment of the donor site to find out the vasculature. Okay. Those vasculature, when you take a preoperative CT angiography, they will show whether there is an anomaly there or not, and they will tell you. They read, but they interpret only whatever is required for us. So they don't insist about the size of the vessel. Even though the normal patency is noted as a result of injecting dye into it, they will not reveal the size of the vessel.
Okay.
So size of the vessel, they have done a study on, based on that, they have given some outline about the McNamara classification of the vessel size for each and every vessels in the throughout the board from head to toe. They have given this few population they have taken, and they have done that the size of the vessel. So choose the high caliber vessel for vein. And venous, the idea of doing this venous anastomosis is completely drain the impure blood from the flap.
Okay.
So classically what they do is they clamp both artery in the vein. They do anastomosis. They don't release the artery in the vein. They both has to be finished, and then simultaneously they'll open this. That is one way of doing this. In that way, you can do either vein or artery. But what is classically advised is do arterial anastomosis first. When you do arterial anastomosis, the disease, the ischemic period is reduced greatly. To greater extent, it is reduced. See, when you do a arterial anastomosis, you are feeding the flap with oxygenated blood.
Oxygenated, yes. Okay.
So, and the second advantage is you can see how much venous return is taking place. If you do arterial anastomosis and release the arterial anastomosis, you can see the backflow through the vein. If your arterial anastomosis is good, you will get adequate blood return from the unanastomosed vein. So that is the one. And when you go for high section vein, there will be a return from the high section vein to the donor vein, to the flap vein. Some amount of blood will go inside and pull back all the viscous and clots from your flap. That is the one. So I prefer to do artery first and followed by the vein. I go for high caliber vein for doing the end-to-stage anastomosis, and I do all the manipulation in the leg itself or the donor site itself. I don't carving of the flap, everything to be done before the division of the pedicle is done. So that reduces the ischemic time. As I said, 2 hours of time is very short for a flap to be manipulated. So to save the time, what we do is manipulation or carving the flap in the donor site itself prior your division of your pedicle.
Which is your material of choice for anastomosis, sir? For suturing? Your material of choice based on your experience. 80 Prolene.
80 Prolene or Ethylene. Round body is mandatory.
Round body is mandatory. Okay.
And we have the usage of conventional way of suturing is becoming obsolete because there are other methods have come. What they say is like Fuchan we recently has presented a non-suturing anastomosis methods for doing anastomosis. In that, he has suggested forget about the ischemic time, and the second principle is don't manipulate the flap too much. Third is all the vascular complication occurs when the endothelial inner intimal layer is insulted. So whatever we put a suture, we always touches the inner layer. We pierce the intimal layer and give a suture. So that should be avoided. That is not achieved by your conventional way of suturing. So how to achieve? The other methods have come using a vascular couplers and staplers, which never goes into beyond the smooth muscle or the artery or the vein. And third is the upcoming is the laser anastomosis. Laser anastomosis is one of the boon for that is going to last as long as microvascular surgery is going to last. Laser will take up in a very short time. It conveys itself only to the outermost layer, the intimal layer. And the major advantage is all these non-suturing methods do not require much of manipulation. You need not feel the adventitia completely. So some amount of adventitia can, much of those things all are impacting on the ischemic time. Manipulation too much to get the proper exit of the needle. So when those things are brought down, so automatically that saves the time for ischemia. So the blood circulation is restored at the earliest. So non-suturing methods are preferred nowadays rather than going for your suturing methods.
Okay. The next question is about access osteotomies. Maybe not relevant to our discussion right now, but you have any experience of doing access osteotomies, sir? Are you doing?
Yes.
And what are the indications? Not very commonly. Are you doing it common?
The obscure sites where you cannot, for example, arising from the infratemporal fossa to the skull base. from
Okay.
the palate for a rat case pouch tumor, pituitary tumor. Those
Okay.
things will not be
It
easily
is
approached
difficult.
with techniques.
Okay. Okay.
And many of the oropharyngeal lesions can only be approached by this axis osteotomy. Axis osteotomy is nothing but exploring the lesion or the tumor via the normal source. Though there is no lesion at all, we have to open the door and go inside. That is the idea of doing this osteotomy, axis osteotomy. Commonly, we do a mandibular swing for reaching
Atas.
the posterior one to the tongue as well as your oropharynx. And sometimes Leefort 1 osteotomy is done to approach the prevertebral region. Many of the studies have conducted since 20 years, and they have found out that Leefort 1 osteotomy is the easiest way of approaching the prevertebral region or pharyngeal region. Those things are Weber-Ferguson, along with the mandibular swing, is the commonest done by the oncology, head and neck oncology, surgical oncologists. And lateral mandibulotomy involving the lateromandibular, the infratemporal fossa, is commonly done by the maxillofacial surgeon to approach the middle cranial and the anterior cranial fossa. These are the various osteotomies which needs just to opening a door to reach that tumor hidden site of the lesion easily. Yes.
So to add you to our axis osteotomies, we had one experience with our medical college, sir. They do something particularly in a burn patient. They anastomose pharynx with jejunum directly. When esophagus is burnt, they do axis osteotomy at the angle region. That is what we do and give it to them. I've heard about that, sir. Are you doing in your place like that?
No, I never.
No, not yeah, okay. Okay, sir. Coming to the next question. This is about the micro neurosurgical procedures. The question is like this: greater auricular nerve, sural nerve, as a graft for motor nerve microneurosurgery, will there be any change in the function or alteration in physiology?
Yes, definitely there is a change. The principle of grafting, actually we are supposed to discuss about grafting, about bone grafts. We were about to discuss. I can add now, I think. See,
Okay.
when you take a graft and there is a defect, there is a proportional ratio to do a grafting. For 1:5. For 1 millimeter of defect, you have to take 5 millimeters of the graft. Either it could be a bone or it could be a for bone, you say cc, cubic centimeters. For 1 centimeter, 5 centimeters. I'll come to that later because let me finish this this nerve grafting first. Greater auricular nerve, the advantage is like if one side is intact, instead of taking a free graft, if you can advance with one part is intact from the C3 level, then it is fine. Fascicle, when the fascicle grafting nerve fascicle is more, the outcome is good. To take a sural nerve, that is multiple fascicles should be there. So that why they advise is this: the creeping should take place between the nerves. It is not going to exactly fit into the nerve fascicle which is grafted from that side. They're going to do only the epinural suture, not much of suture. Should not insult too much also for that matter. All this vasa, nervo vasorum, all these things, nervi vasorum. So should not get insulted. So multiple sutures should be avoided. So what they advise is instead of doing a multiple sutures, they take a high caliber nerve, like sural nerve. Or sometimes muscle fascicles are advised, like how you do it for your facial reanimation. They do that. So muscle fascicles, why they are advising is the voluminous muscle has to be taken. The third is nerve conduits are very much useful nowadays. Nerve conduits keep that regeneration intact. Instead of going for a cross innervation from the contralateral side, they advise to go for a conduit. Conduit keeps that tube intact, so that the regeneration will happen within the nerve conduit, which is available in various sizes, and most of them are resolved also. After 2 years, it gets resolved completely, and cheaper when you compare with the economic standards. And based on the size, only 4 or 5 sizes are there, 5 mm, 3 mm, like that. The only major trunk are going to be reconstructed, not complete this thing. Nerve conduits are giving a very good results, functional results, especially when it comes with the motor nerve. Especially most of the time we always sacrifice this marginal mandibular nerve. So those nerves, apart from the cross innervation takes few months or year to come, which happens in few weeks. This nerve conduits. So take a high, multiple fascicles should be there. Do epidural suturing alone, reduce the number of sutures, or else you stabilize with your conduit and leave it for until the nerve gets regenerated. And shall I add that about the bone graft few which
Yeah.
you want to?
Please,
Yeah.
sir. Yeah, please.
The difference, as we all know, for the benefit of the PGs, the difference between the graft and the flap is like graft does not possess your vascularity. Proper channeled vascularity is not there. You have to take from one side without vascularity and paste in that. And it has got a limitations. It is 7 centimeters, the maximum you can address the problem with your bone graft. Choose similar source of donor site, that is endochondral ossification, intramembranous ossification. Maxilla is intramembranous. You take from the calvarium or the ramus of the mandible for doing your. This is given by 70s. This is given by Philip Boyne. You can go through the article. Dissimilar source, what happens is like it is like one more or less like not as bad as your alloplast, but it is not combating with that because it has got a two phases of bone formation. Say for we always invariably take that iliac crest, which is arising from the endochondral origin. The cartilage perichondrium has to become a periosteum. From the periosteum, it has to release the osteoprogenitor cells, which is going to lead to your osteoblast formation. So before that, it goes for shrinkage and goes for a resorption very spontaneously. That's what we augment a defect which is more than what is required. Since we are used to this method, we are keep on doing this. But actually, for 1 centimeter defect, you have to take 5 centimeters of a graft. Volume you have to take. So select similar source of donor site so that you can augment and get back the best results out of it. And graft has got a lot of limitations, like size of the defect matters always. The second is there should be a distal and proximal. We started with the Boyd's classification of the central defect. Imagine the central defect, though it is smaller in size, you make a cut in this to get that. Can you imagine this? Can you see this like this to get that harmony of the anterior face chin? So when you make a cut in the non-vascular graft, that's no use. Definitely go for resorption, very easy. So already it's a cortical bone, ultra thick D1 bone. We cannot do that this thing. So fourth principle is there should be, for the osteogenesis to happen, there should be both segments, that is proximal and distal segment should be intact. So the first principle is there should be the defect should be less than 7 centimeters. Second is similar donor site. Third is proximal and distal fragment should be intact. Imagine if it is cantilever, if you put a bone graft, it will not take up because the another fragment is. Hope you all understand that what I'm saying. The proximal segment is missing, only the distal fragment is present. If you just anchor it like a cantilever, that will eventually go for that will melt very soon. That's what I want to add in the.
Okay, coming to the next question. Next question, it is about the reconstruction ladder. And the question is, where do the tissue expanders exactly fit in the ladder? This was the next question.
The tissue expanders and the flaps are non-identical principles. The tissue expanders, it has got the principle behind this. It expands the epidermis and shrinks the thinning out of the dermal layer. Third, it goes for elongation of the muscle. Later, it causes atrophy over the muscle which is present inside. And the third is implant rejection. And there is something called rule of 10. 10 ml of fluid should be present in every time it should be there. And 10 weeks you have to wait until it gets expanded. And every time you remove the 10 ml and replace with 10 ml periodically, or this port has to be filled up. And commonly used in maxillofacial is your rectangular shaped your tissue expanders and your semilunar shape, not the spherical which is used for breast and all. So the tissue expansion will have advantage of similar tone, texture, color of the skin, and close proximity to the recipient site. These are the advantages. Thinning out of the skin eventually, and atrophy of the deeper muscles, infection, portal rejection, I mean the implant rejection, or the drawbacks of using this. The limitation is cancer, they have not proven distraction, and tissue expanders are wonderful procedure for reconstruction because the recipient side own tissues being expanded or elongated. But still, the problem is uh, addressing the cancer patient. It is again a challenge. So tissue expanders got a limitation with you can't use it for all cases, especially basal cell carcinoma lesion is small, melanoma, those kind of lesion tissue expanders are good. And if you wait for the tissue to get expanded for 10 weeks, patient cannot wait until then. The cancer patient cannot wait without getting untreated. So in that case, the flap becomes the choice. So these are all the challenges faced by the tissue expanders. And you can nowadays the intraoral expanders have come. What they do is they do a mucosal extension. They use it for palate closure, and they augment the bone. Before augmentation of the bone, to increase the height of the alveolus or bone, they do a tissue expansion, the mucosal expansion, because getting keratinized mucosa is one of the daunting part of your expansion. The tissue you cannot get. So what they do is they place it inside. They keep on expanding it. Once the desirable volume is achieved, subcutaneous volume is achieved, you can do a bone grafting underneath. The second is the bone resorption. If you keep it on the bone resorption, you can see the crater on the bone once the port is removed after the 10th week. So these are the advantages and setbacks of using the tissue expanders. Yes, sir.
Next question is about the bone grafts for microvascular reconstruction. Is it applicable now, sir? I am a little bit confused with this question. Do they use
bone graft cannot be used for
cannot be used.
Microvascular is two different entities. It is
Yes.
non-vascularized and it is bone graft is like you can use about a bone morphogenetic protein. That is one of
Yes.
the best methods of doing this. But the results, again, you have to think in terms of post-operative radiation after this. How long the bone morphogenetic protein can live in the irradiated tissue. That is one of the challenges. Usually, the demineralized cortical or cancerous bone will need adequate healthy tissue bed, vascular tissue bed, so that the osteoinduction will be better. So, bone morphogenetic protein is again found in the field of maxillofacial surgery for smaller defects. For longer defects, cancerous patient, ablative surgery, when you go for extensive ablation, then you have to think about any one of these flaps. Not only microvascular, you can think about the local region flaps.
Okay, so coming to the last question, what is, in your experience, what is the best option for reconstructing a mandibular continuity defect?
I prefer microvascular prefibular microvascular flap. That is the only option. I want to do a distraction, but unfortunately, as I said, crossing the midline is one of the challenges when you do a transport distraction that we have seen in some of the patients, and some of the patients are giving good results also. Then the patient has to wear this hardware for a long time until it gets consolidated. And advantages, histogenesis. Distraction histogenesis is one of the major advantages with your transport distraction. The advantage with the microvascular flap is immediate results. If it goes for all or none, that is another challenge in microvascular. All or none. If it goes for everything is fine, it is fine. When the volume increases, there will be deterioration in the result. To optimize the outcome, you have to go for your lesser volume of tissues and avoid manipulation. Instead of trying to achieve the multiple contour, minor corrections, all these things, you just put a straight graft, then you repair it later, then that will be the good option for reconstruction of any kind. Either it could be a malignant defect resulting from malignancy or from your benign lesions. That way you can, I think, I prefer only a microvascular reconstruction using prefibular flap. Easy donor, very minimal donor safety with microvascular is your prefibular, better than your iliac crest. Iliac crest, you will not have, the patient will not be able to wear a garment over that, lose the harmony. Lateral cutaneous nerve is again the biggest problem with the patient. And hernia, early hernia, maybe at that time a patient may not be having any problem. But later, unless the anterior superior iliac spine is meticulously sutured or less manipulated, the outcome will be fine. But still, it is challenging at the from the donor side morbidity point of view. So fibula will have a minimal donor side. We have only one patient complication. That too we can manage.
Sir, reconstructing the anterior mandibular defect using free fibula and the posterior mandibular defect, any kind of a modification you do for anterior and posterior, or it is the same for both? Because achieving the contour on the anterior mandible is very difficult. How do you plan accordingly, sir, for that?
Yeah, osteotomy plays a role, major role in this. So let me start with the posterior mandibular defect. The ramus reconstruction is not required as it doesn't have any function except the facial form. So when you plan for a reconstruction plate or this printed 3D printed earlier, the pre-printed plate, that takes care of your harmony of the ramus. It is not going to do anything with the harmony of the flap. What you're going to place is going to be only on the medial surface of the plate, not on the lateral surface. So the contour is taken care by your plate, not by your flap. So no need to worry about that. This is a Greenberg principle of reconstruction. Greenberg craniomaxillofacial reconstruction by a textbook by Greenberg. Craniofacial reconstruction of maxillofacial. Please go through that book. So the ramus, actually that's what happening. We want only the condylar and the ramal component using your plate, and the rest of the thing you need the bone because you need to put an implant. The conventional process cannot be placed over the reconstruction. Over a period of time, the plate can get exposed. So we want only a body reconstruction. That is a straightforward flap. Once the flap takes up very well with a double barrel and nothing like your minimally manipulated flap. Coming to the anterior, as you said, you have to make a midline cut to get the tent of the chin. So when you make the tent, you need to go for smaller size defect. It is not having much of long span. You have to do a vascularized graft because you are cut in the midline and causing injury to the periosteum, which is present in the free graft. So go for a vascularized graft with less manipulation. The outcome will be best. Yes.
The last slide has some of the questions. I think you have answered most of the questions. The last question is the time needed for microvascular surgery training. Your advice to the postgraduates.
Yeah. First is once again footnote. The template is mindset. We all conservatively brought up from day one. Though our fingers are programmed to do a minute work, we have that opportunity to get earlier training, the fineness and the perfection. So easy for us to learn. It plays a major role. Second is we need to only about the anatomy or the distance side. That's it. We're not worried about anything else. And the anatomy is very easy for any maxillofacial surgeon to read. Unlike head and neck is more intricate and complicated. You cannot. A lot of things are to be learned. Whereas in the case of other area, distant sides, you need to know about functional anatomy. That's it. Very few vessels will be there. 13 muscles in the leg or 12 muscles in the hand. Few are in the abdomen, 2 or 3 in the like that. And most of them are consistent, having consistent anatomy. There won't be much of variation at all. We have to modify according to a requirement. That's it. So we need to program ourselves for your anastomosis. That too, it is going to be obsolete, and all easiest methods have been introduced nowadays. So there is a spike in the success rate of universal spike in the success rate. And third is like you have to, the training period depends upon the individual mindset. How easily you are learning, that is very important. We have observed some 90 cases in 1 year span of time. That's it. After that, we started doing on our own. Coming with the threatening part for any of there is a prejudicistic threat in the mind that this is something new. Infection in the head and neck and the leg are going to be the same. The treatment remains the same. So methodology going to be there. The principle remains the same. And patience, that is one of the important thing I would like to insist on this. You cannot finish this job and go out after 5 o'clock, like how we do it for the other part of your surgical work. So if some complication comes, then you have to come and address that. You have to identify that complication. You try to prevent everything. If it comes, you have to address the complication. So that is the one. earlier complication identification. Few 1 minute I want to tell about the flap scheme and the flap exploration. The flap exploration, it is ideal will be your first 36 hours. In that 36 hours, first 24 hours is very, very important. Within the 24 hours, if you're able to identify the complication, how to identify the complication. Commonest complication will be venous congestion. When you prick the flap, it oozes like anything, dark color of blood. That flap is going for a flaw. You have to take the patient immediately for re-anastomosis. Prick the flap, filling takes place 5 seconds or more than that. Slowly, bright red is coming. Healthy flap. Temperature is again a misleading term. Intraoral flap temperature will be even with your normal temperature, core temperature. So you cannot rely on that. And desquamation, if the flap is not healthy, the flap will go for desquamation of the skin over that. So that is a classical sign of doing this. So other methods like couplers, staplers, lasers, glue, or the various methods, and Liga clips are used for doing anastomosis. Just 2-3 Liga clips over the wall, they do anastomosis. That is one of the methods. And magnetic couplers have come, disposable, resorbable couplers have come. So all these things are enhancing the part of anastomosis, and the things are made easy nowadays, and the outcome is becoming better and better every day. So you should have a persistence to learn that. As again telling you, should come out from the conventional mindset, and then you have to start doing this. You cannot compare this and that. As I said, both are non-identical principles. So everything is unraveled. That is nothing. You can unravel everything when complication comes. When you are prepared, preparation comes from your that leads to confidence, and then you can do it. So nothing can be impossible in that way.
Okay, thanks, sir. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. Are we allowed to take questions from the participants?
Yeah, please.
So there are questions on the chat box. Satya sir, are you able to see that, or do you want me to read?
Yes, madam.
One, sir?
Yeah, I can see, but there are too many questions, madam. Should I ask him all the questions?
No, so whatever is missed.
Looks like
how much heparin preoperative, intraoperative, postoperative should be given during microvascular surgery? I think sir has an answer.
Yes. Systemic heparin is not mandatory.
Okay.
Systemic heparin is not mandatory. Local irrigation is mandatory. Yeah. Systemic heparin is not absolute indication. Whereas local heparin. No. Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. Audible. Please
systemically, whatever we give 5,000 unit, the 0.5 milligram of heparin only reaching the site of anastomosis. The rest and all will go to the other side, which is again precipitating the adverse effect of the heparin. Second is, intraoperatively, local irrigation gives good results. If at all, if you want, you can go for antiplatelet after the first 24 hours for low molecular aspirin, 70 milligrams twice daily, that can be given systemically. Local irrigation, the falciparum, deltaprin is one of the bone which can be given subcutaneously, intraoperatively. And again, the donor site should not have much of bleeding. So the tourniquet time again plays a major role in deciding that. So healthy individual, young individual, and benign lesions, not much of, or minimally without any comorbidities, we will not worry about giving a systemic heparin. Whereas subcutaneous falciparum, deltaprin is one of the congener of your heparin. That is the best way of giving a systemic which not have much of side effects.
Okay, two pending questions. One is about your experience or laser anastomosis, and another one is about any minimum age criteria is there for undergoing flap procedures.
Minimally?
Any eligibility age pertaining to the age, the minimum age for the patient whom can undergo flap surgeries, flap procedures. Something like that. No age limit.
This is the limit actually. No age
this is
limit.
The limit.
Systemic comorbidity, no limit. You have nothing. Laser anastomosis. It is just like welding. That's it. It is same diode laser which is used for our soft tissue lasers. What we used for the flap surgeries, the regular gingival flap surgeries. The same. It needs some pigmentation material like hemoglobin. Hemoglobin we cannot rely because it keeps on changing at the time of hemodynamic system changes at the time of anastomosis. So we cannot rely on it. So what we do is we take that what is that methylene blue as your the diode laser, so that it welds both end of the vessel. And then we have not yet tried on artery on man and human. We have tried on rats, doing well, but we have done only on for venous anastomosis on human being, not with the arterial anastomosis, because the pulsatile pressure exerted once the patient comes out of the GA, we may not be knowing what is going to happen once the wound is closed. So what we are doing is like we are doing only the venous anastomosis using the diode laser. Second is we never tried on end to side with the lasers. We have tried end to side with couplers, staplers, of course conventional suturing, but which is not tried with the lasers so far. So this is the, we have done more than 80-85 cases on that and doing very well, and we got published also.
So I think the rest of the questions sir has already answered, sir. Like how to check for flap vitality, what flap is used for mandibular defects, timing of microvascular surgery. All this sir has answered. So heparin was answered just now. Those were the questions on the chat book, sir. That's it.
Yes, no more questions. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jimson sir.
Thank you, Unadal.
Close.
Can we close?
Yeah. Now the question link.
Yeah, I'll do that, sir. Thank you, Senthil sir, and thank you, Satya sir. I think Satya sir, you're an extremely excellent moderator. And Senthil Murugan sir, you wonderfully took all the questions. Thanks a lot, sir. And Jimson sir, as usual, being the wonderful host, and Reena ma'am, who have always supported us. And to the participants, now I would be sharing your questions, which is the link. And you have 5 minutes to answer your questions. And here you go.
Thank you, Dr. Senthil and Dr. Satya, for the wonderful presentation and moderation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Pleasure listening to you again.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for the organization. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The link has been shared, participants. So your time starts now. You have 5 minutes.